Scott, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for taking this time off after a very powerful swim.
Yes.
You swim every morning. It makes me really happy. And I knew you before. You said I knew you before in 2000. You've been here since you came here first.
I first came here in 1986.
1986. I came here in
But not Tokyo.
Where were you?
Shiga Prefecture.
Was it on the JET program?
No. It was a very unique program that was started by a professor at Lansing Community College and an executive from Kansai.
Right.
They happened to be sharing a plane flight together in business class, and they just started a conversation. And by the end of the flight, they had a handshake agreement that the community college in mid-Michigan, in Lansing, Lansing Community College, would send students to Kansai every year to work on a stern-wheel boat called the Michigan.
All right.
And I was, I think, the fifth year of the program.
Now, when you say stern wheel, what is that? You mean the
Mississippi?
The Mississippi.
boat.
That's cool. With the big, the water hits it.
Yeah.
And it turns it.
Yeah, and they called it the Michigan because Shiga and Michigan have sister state relationship, and the city of Otsu and the city of Lansing had a sister city relationship.
Okay.
And so Lansing Community College, for I think 35 years, sent roughly 20 kids, pretty much half women, half men, to study Japanese culture, language, while they worked on this boat. And it was sort of a work-study program, one of its kind, I think, in the U.S., and something that dramatically changed most of the kids' lives who went on the program.
Including yours.
Including mine.
Why did you decide to do that? What interest did you have in Japan?
Marie said, you were going to ask this question.
She did?
Yes. And she said, think about what your answer is. And
she's good. How does she know what I'm going to ask?
Always the same answer.
What is it?
I just wanted to get the heck out of Michigan.
It was like that then.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about your life in Michigan. When you grew up,
what
was it like? I mean, first of all, tell me your family structure. How many kids?
Yeah, so my parents were married very young. My mother was 17, my father was 18 when I was born.
Okay.
So
you're the first?
I'm the first. I was the oldest. And then my sister came 2 years later.
Okay.
So we grew up, my parents divorced quite young as well. So
How
I think
old?
I was 7 or 8 years old, maybe even younger, maybe
Same
5 or
with me.
6. But we had a very strong family unit. My grandparents were kind of the foundation.
On your mother's side?
On my father's side. My mother's parents were quite a bit older, so they were pretty much retired by the time I was, old enough to remember them. But yeah, my grandparents on my father's side were very young, and so I would spend weekends with my grandparents, and I lived with my father. My sister ended up living with my mother. She moved out to California, so I would spend my summers in California and the school year in Michigan. So I knew something there was outside of Michigan.
You knew there was something.
I knew there was something outside.
Because you'd see it every summer when you went to
And
California.
I would travel, and the kids from my small hometowns, Scott's going off to, California.
You're going to come back off
again.
and see,
And I'd be tan, and, I was riding a skateboard before anybody else was riding skateboards in Michigan. And, so when I graduated from high school, I'm like, I got to get out of here. And my mother...
So you didn't, but you had your buddies and stuff.
Yeah.
And you
I played sports and...
Right. And you still favor the Michigan teams.
Oh, Michigan State.
Still, all right.
We won again yesterday, 7-0. But Michigan is too, so we're going to come into East Lansing on the 30th of October and be both undefeated and top of the Big
So
Ten.
what did you like about California? You just knew it's outside of Michigan, but did you have anything about California you were fond about, or outside the skateboard?
Yeah, so I was introduced to the ocean at a very young age. One of my first trips out to California was after I saw the movie Jaws.
So you didn't want to get in the ocean?
I didn't want to get in the ocean. But my mother literally lived 2 blocks from the beach in Oxnard.
In Oxnard, okay.
So my mother had remarried a Seabee, and the Seabees had a base right there near Oxnard, as Port Hueneme.
Okay.
And so I grew up on the summers on Silver Strand Beach. And they called it Silver Strand Beach because that's where they used to film the old Hollywood movies.
Okay.
And I learned how to snorkel, and at about 12, 13 years old, I learned how to scuba dive.
Who, your stepfather?
Yeah, my stepfather was
But he was a SEAL.
diving instructor.
But he was a civil engineer or a SEAL? CB.
He was actually, my stepfather that taught me how to scuba dive was Army.
Army, okay.
And he had lived in Okinawa.
Okay.
So he had talked to me about Okinawa. He talked to me, and he was a commercial diver for sea urchins when I was like 13 years old. And he had been a NAUI instructor, so he taught me how to scuba dive, and I would scuba dive with him while he was working on the sea urchin boat.
How old were you when this was happening?
I was like 13 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So he would jump in with his line hooked up to the boat, because he'd be down there for hours, just raking in sea urchins, and then he'd sell those to the Japanese processors in LA.
Uni, yes.
Uni, yeah. So back before it really became a big thing, he was in the sushi trade.
So what year would that have been? In the 70s?
That would have been the 70s.
The 70s.
76, 77,
How old are you
78.
now, Scott?
I'm 55.
55, okay. So you're still young, yeah.
Still young.
You're still a young guy.
That's why I shaved my beard, because it was coming in gray. And I'm like, I'm too young for
No,
a
too
gray
young for
beard.
that, yeah. All right, so you started scuba diving with your stepfather.
My stepfather, yeah. And I thought that was going to be my route to life. Was I wanted to become a commercial diver. I wanted to study the ocean. I wanted to be a marine biologist. So yeah, California, the ocean kind of set me on a path, and then boom, I come to Japan.
Wait. So, but you're California. You'd done that. That was only during the summer.
Yeah, only during the
So then, when you came back to Michigan, all of a sudden, you said, "Okay, we only have lakes, and I need to get back to an ocean somehow."
Exactly.
And then they said you can go to Japan. And you said, and he talked about Okinawa. Hey.
Yep. And my grandfather had been in World War II, so we had.
Well, he wasn't fond of Japan, then, was he?
You know, he wasn't anti-Japanese. That's the one.
What did he do?
Really
what he
appreciated
did.
with my grandfather. He was GM. You know, everybody was in GM.
Right.
I mean, our small town where I grew up, Potterville, Michigan.
Okay.
Literally 30 minutes outside of Lansing.
But I mean, you mean after the war he went to GM?
After the war, he came back and he worked for his father, who was a mechanic.
Well, but when you said GM, what do you mean?
General Motors.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So you said he worked for him.
Yeah, he ended up being a general manager of a service department at a small Chevrolet, GM dealership.
Right.
So we were a GM family.
Okay.
In Michigan, you're
GM Ford. You're one of the big.
Yeah. And
everything was steel. Yeah.
And he didn't want us becoming mechanics.
He said he knew that wasn't the route to success.
He was encouraging us to go to school, and so.
Let me say us. It was just you.
My sister and.
But your sister was in California.
They moved back. So my idea before I graduated from high school was diving. I'll be a commercial diver. Looks like an interesting career. I want to be a marine biologist. And up until I'd gone to Japan, I still wanted to be a marine biologist. Okay. Came back from Japan from this program.
And how old were you? I guess you were 17 or something?
I was 19 because I turned 20 in Japan.
In Japan?
Yeah.
Your 20th birthday was here.
This program was incredible because we came to Japan and we were like celebrities.
Because
down in Shiga, nobody had ever seen foreigners.
Period.
The women with blonde hair would have their hair touched by
and your eyes being gray and shoot you in the
blue eyes.
I
had a kid. Yeah, it's like, why are your eyes blue? It's just because my mom's eyes were blue, my dad's eyes were blue.
That's right.
It's so it was a very unique experience, and I went to some of our heads quite early on.
Some people got really messed up quick.
Well, I don't know if messed up is
not messed up,
but they thought probably a little bit more of themselves.
I know, that's right.
And then some people like wanted that so bad that they came back or they stayed in Japan.
How did you feel about it? I mean, what did it do to you, honestly? What did it do to you?
I liked the attention, but I think what drew me back to Japan, it was the sense of history, the sense of community. I grew up in a small town, so there was a sense of community. But especially after living in Tokyo and meeting people and the networking and business just seemed really natural, meeting people, going to events and things. So it would be really hard for me to turn off when I'd go home for like the summer or something for a couple of weeks. You'd be like, I got to do something. I got to be someplace. I got to.
But nobody else was.
And nobody else was. So
you look like the only rabbit running around.
Yeah. So I was like, it was, and I appreciate where I grew up now. For the first 10 or 15 years after leaving, whenever I'd go home, it was like, I want to be home because I love family. Family's the most important thing in my life. But then, I'd look at my friends and people that I'd grown up with, and they're still in the small town, and it just wasn't really for me. And about 10 years ago, after the earthquake and the nuclear thing, sending the kids back to the U.S., and I moved back to the U.S. as well, I started really appreciating where I grew up. And I settled with the kids in the small town my parents were living in at the time, called Williamston. So it's just east side of Lansing instead of the southwest side of Lansing. And, I ran into some old friends from high school, and we reconnected. And, we're connected now on Facebook with a lot of those people, and we keep track of each other's lives. And I just felt really fortunate to have grown up in that small community, to have been able to play basketball, first string, football, first string, track. We were runners up at states. The kind of thing that I wouldn't have gotten anyplace else, really, if I'd gone to school like in California, LA, or someplace. Or
why not? Why not? Because it's too big and too much competition.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying. Okay.
I grew up in a class of 69 kids, right? I graduated 34th in a class of 69, so I wasn't no straight A student.
There you go, but you were right in the middle, right?
I was right in the middle, and and I really enjoyed my high school experience, right. And that's really what I wanted for my kids. And so with the earthquake and the nuclear thing, it was like an opportunity for me to get the kids into the U.S. and focused on getting an English education for high school.
But you were married once before.
Yes.
Was your wife Japanese?
She was half Japanese, half British.
Because I look at your kids and I can see Asian blood in them. Right? How'd they get along in Michigan? I mean, in your small town.
So we had a really... so my parents, like I mentioned, are young. Right. And so my mother...
And they're doing well now.
They're doing really well.
That's good.
They're retired and just taking it easy.
But how old are your parents then? They could be in the...
my mom is 17 years older than me, so she's 73. She just turned 73.
She's a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so how do your daughters get along? You have 2 daughters.
No, I've got... I do. I've got 3 daughters.
3 daughters, okay.
So
right.
My second marriage, we got 5 between the 2 of us.
Okay.
So my 3 and her 2. So it's kind of a Brady Bunch sort of situation. The kids never really grew up together because they were kind of older.
Right.
But my daughter, Fiona, the youngest, and her daughter, Ellie, the youngest, lived together for a couple of years in Seattle before we moved back to Japan.
Question about Fiona. Why 2 Fs?
So on my ex-wife's side of the family, her mother's Welsh.
Okay.
And
that's how it's...
So my eldest son, Sheffrey, is the Welsh form of Jeffrey. He's got 2 F's in his name.
Okay,
Stefan
okay.
with 2 F's, and Fiona.
2 F's.
2 F's.
Never seems to go that way. Okay, that's interesting.
But it is, yeah. And so the girls got to spend some time with each other. We are always hoping that we can get all of them together for a special occasion. Even our wedding, we weren't able to have my eldest son there because he was busy with a baby, and he works in the sushi trade, and he's 6 days a week, 14-hour days here in Japan. So all the kids moved back. My kids all moved back to Japan after they graduated from high school.
So I was just asking, what was it like for them in Michigan?
So the kids each, when they were in 3rd grade, so 10, 11 years old, moved back to the States and live with my parents. Full immersion. Like throw them in the deep end.
I got you.
They'll swim. They'll learn how to speak English. Because I always understood Japanese.
So you would make it easy for them?
They wouldn't speak English to me. They would hear me in English, so they could always hear, but they couldn't really speak. So threw them in the deep end with Grandma and Grandpa. each one of them had their moment a week after they arrived, crying on the phone. Grandma and Grandpa don't understand me. I want to go home.
It's not going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. So they really had a good experience. They went back to the U.S., had friends already that they had made in school there. And I really wanted that small town high school experience for them, where they're going to dances, they're going to prom, they're playing on the sports teams. I mean, my second son, Stefan's team went to state championships 2 years in a row for soccer. Came up short both times, but you know, he was a track star. He was a sophomore. He got his varsity letter as a sophomore.
So they did get along okay.
Yeah. They all thrived. My oldest son had some really close friends that he still keeps in touch with now, and they were all kind of into Japan, and you know, and yeah. So here they were attending some Japanese schools. My eldest son until he was at junior high.
Here in Tokyo?
In Tokyo. Well, no, in Zushi, actually.
In Zushi, okay.
And, you know, he had a little bit of discrimination, you know. He's not Japanese, you know. But he had some other friends who were half or not fully Japanese. It could have been a struggle for them, but it wasn't, I think, at the time, because we moved to the U.S. And then they were just one of 100 kids who, you know, weren't, you know, sticking out like they would in Japan. So,
right, okay.
Yeah.
How old are they now?
The oldest is 27. He'll be 27 at the end of this month. My second son's 23.
Seconds? I thought you had only daughters.
No, Chonan, Jinan, Chojo. So son, daughter.
Okay,
and
that's
daughter. Yeah.
The daughter's your...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your son, daughter. So how old are the boys?
So 27,
right.
23, and 21.
And they're all here?
They're all here.
Your daughter's here too?
And my mom actually changed her job
to make sure she could
fly. She ended up being a United Airline attendant.
Okay.
So she'd fly to Japan, and they would actually see their American grandparents more often than see the Japanese grandparents.
That's not unusual, yeah.
And so they were close to their grandparents. And you know, I was trying to get back after the earthquake to Michigan, and so I worked out a deal with my company to move me back to the States, and then I raised the kids for the final 5 years of their high school career, or their high school years, 6 years, 7 years. Yeah.
What a journey.
I was a single father for about 4 years, and you know, with my parents there at first, and then they retired and moved away, and then I finished raising the last two by myself. And yeah, it wasn't easy, but
I can imagine.
The work from home thing, I've been doing that for the last 10 years. So
anyway, so that was natural for you.
Yeah. And, but I got to spend some really quality years with the kids those last.
We took out a big chunk out of your life that I can't put in all this because
it is difficult.
Yeah, because you came to Japan. Okay, tell me about the happy times. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so after I'd done my first program in Japan, I was.
Which for how long? How long was that program?
It was only 10 months.
10 months, okay.
10 months, full immersion, working and going to school.
But wait, but the people you came with, so you spoke with them in English every day.
Yeah.
So you have that, but in order to do your job, you had to speak Japanese.
My job.
Whatever you had to do when you came.
Yeah.
No, when you came here, the full immersion.
No.
Well, how did that
Almost
work?
nobody spoke Japanese. There were a couple kids who had studied Japanese before they came on the program, but the majority of us didn't.
I know. But so when you said you had full immersion when you came here for 10 months.
Yeah.
But what about the people that came with you? They spoke English, so it's not full immersion. You have a chance to speak English.
You're right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Full immersion to me means
no
one except for you speak English.
No.
So therefore, you have to speak in Japanese.
You're right. No, we had literally 3 months of Japanese instruction, and then we came over, and then we were working side by side with Japanese,
right,
and the other students on the program.
Okay.
So some kids just stuck to themselves, and some kids wanted to spend more time with Japanese and make friends in Japan.
And trying to improve their Japanese.
And I was kind of half and half. I had my roommate and a couple other guys that we hung out. We went all over the place with each other. And then the people at work we became really close to, like family, because we were working together every week.
What did you do? What was the work?
It was waiters and waitresses on the boat.
On that's
on the
right.
boat. Yeah.
To who? To only Japanese?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, 99.9%.
So what they do? They just go across the they go across the river.
They had cruises every day. They'd have the morning cruise. They'd have.
And what? So cruise lasts how long when they take them out?
About 2 hours. 90
Okay,
minutes.
so they're on there and they have entertainment.
Yeah.
You guys
Crazy entertainment.
really? Wait, was it a family thing or was it just an adult type?
No, it was a family thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
an adult thing.
Okay.
They'd have the night cruise, and they brought a band over from the U.S.
Okay.
They'd put them up in housing.
Okay.
They had a woman and man team, or just the guy playing guitar, singing "You Are My Sunshine," you know, and Beatles tunes and things like this. And the Japanese would sing along, and he'd get in with clapping and singing, and it was crazy. It was fun.
And what kind of food did you serve? Everything else had.
So they had like French dining. They'd have like steak or
This was really formal.
Yeah. And so we learned, formal dining.
And where to force the knives and everything
Exactly.
down.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
The Japanese.
What kind of glasses?
The training and stuff. We went through probably a month worth of training before they even opened the boat for the season.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd get here in March and begin lessons, and we'd have our classes 3 or 4 days a week, and we'd have the boat 3 or 4 days a week, and and then it's like all of a sudden you get a check at the end of the month and you're going, they're going to pay us to do this as well. So all we did, we paid tuition, we got on the program, we paid tuition, we came to Japan, and then all of a sudden they're paying us to be on the program because we're working,
Right.
and they're putting us in
They
housing,
have to, right? Which is free.
which is
Yeah, they're paid for.
and I'm like, wow,
Right.
they're going to pay us to do this.
And when you calculated it into dollars, you said what?
Yeah, it was still okay.
It's still okay, yeah.
But that was 230 yen of the dollar back then. And then I think it dropped to 180 before we left Japan. And so we took a trip to Hawaii on the way back. Like diversion, stop in Hawaii, take a little vacation.
What were some of the challenges when you had to be on the boat that you, what is it that you look forward to, and what is it that you thought, I wish I didn't have to do this?
So I don't know if I thought about it at the time, but we took a bus every morning from our apartment, which was not close to the Biwako, to the boat where the boat docked. It would take roughly 45 minutes to an hour, but that was typical of all Japanese, right? For us as kids in the U.S., we had a car, right? We'd drive to school, we'd drive to work. So the commute wasn't a bad thing, but being there every morning, getting changed in a little dingy locker room with cockroaches the size of
Little
cats.
mice, yeah, right.
Yeah. Shaking out your clothes, and it built your confidence, standing in front of people, waiting on people.
What would you have to say? So did you have to do this entrance when they come in and everyone's?
Well,
tell me, teach me, tell me.
So we would line up,
Okay.
with our uniforms on. We all had uniforms, so we looked like like the Love Boat,
Okay.
with the white jackets and the black pants, and we'd bow in the morning,
How many of you were there?
I'll say, 26 students, 25 students,
All lined up.
all lined up.
How many
Well,
Japanese?
No. We were AB groups.
Because you had two boats.
We had one boat, but we had two groups of students. So the A group of students would work this shift, the B group students with the other shifts or days.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
So it was 7 days a week. We had students on the boat, but we had like 12, 13. So there'd be 12 or 13 Americans, probably 12 or 13 or 20 Japanese. So the boat was operated with a mixed group of Japanese and American kids.
And the mixed group also the jobs were also well integrated.
Yeah. So there was
Like you just went in one,
there was like 3 floors to the boat.
right?
You had kind of formal dining, and then you had informal dining, and then you had a snack bar with open door seating, was juseki, or whoever showed up got the seats, and then you had a gift shop, and then you had something called the Royal Room, where only women waited on the tables, coffee and tea. It was pretty fancy at the front of the boat.
So the Royal Room it had husband and wife sometimes too? Or?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was
nothing.
yeah. It was like a VIP.
Okay,
room.
VIP room.
Right. That they could
Right.
pay
And the meal was a little different there.
Yeah, I think it was the same meal as the fine dining, but it was served by women on their knees, basically, like Japanese style.
Oh, really?
You kneel and then serve, and then.
So the girls had to learn how to do that.
Girls had to learn how to
but
do
no
that.
guys had.
Guys didn't. We weren't allowed in the royal
room.
Right. We worked the snack bar. We carried tables. What do you call it? Trays.
Trays, right.
And things to the guests.
Would the guests ever try to tip you because they knew that in the U.S. you got tipped?
Never.
They never ever did that.
Never.
That's good.
They did some other strange things.
Really?
But we'd have Japanese come right away. The Japanese managers and
when that happened.
Yeah.
Because
the company was very, very
good
about those kind of things. So we had to provide a deposit of $850 to guarantee that we would behave, and that $850 was kept in a separate account. That if you did not behave, that $850 paid for your plane ticket home. And so there was always this if you don't listen and you don't follow our instructions, then you will be sent home. Mm-hmm. And I had to borrow that money from my grandfather because my parents didn't have that kind of cash just laying around. And there was a lot of kids that got homesick.
Okay.
I was homesick for the first 3 months. It was horrible because I'd never really been without family for my entire life until that point. But I don't think it ever got to that point. But there were so many years. We had some good years. We had some bad years. I mean, the school did, and the company did. One year, the students tried to go on strike, and
you only came over once, right?
I only came over once. But
you're talking about the history of the program.
The history of the program. What happened once in a while, and not every year. On our year, again, it was an older student. A woman who was probably 25, and you remember most of us were 21, 22, or even younger.
Okay.
And they're like, why should I follow these directions? They started maybe getting part-time jobs outside of the regular work schedule, or they might not have shown up for work. And it was just like, well, the company can't control me, the school can't control me. I pay the school money to go to school, and I shouldn't have to show up for classes, or I shouldn't have to show up for work if I don't want to. And then it was like, no, we have to have a conversation. Here's the $850. We're going home, right?
And they did that.
They did that a couple of times. Yeah.
Right. And what about the guys? Never had any guys. Basically, it was always a girl
that went home. Oh no, there were probably some guys that went home.
Yeah.
Some guys that dropped out of the program, fell in love, and then just decided not to come to work again.
Really?
Yeah.
I could still.
Yeah, I mean, I would say overwhelmingly a positive experience for over 95% of the kids.
Does the program still exist?
It does not exist in the way it used to. I think they still send 1 or 2 students over just for the experience. In Shiga, they have a center for Michigan universities on the opposite side of the lake from where this program was, where they actually study Japanese. And kids from other universities in Michigan come and study Japanese. So I'd say overwhelmingly a really positive impact for the state and for the people who went on the program. A lot of the kids, like myself, fell in love with the country, had children here who are Japanese, and our lives have some connection to Japan still. My sister did the program a year after I did.
When did she? Okay.
And she has no really connection with Japan other than me.
Okay.
But she did the program.
She went back to Michigan?
Experience. Yeah.
Okay.
Very unique experience. And she graduated and moved out to Seattle, and her whole life revolves around her life in Seattle.
But I thought she's living in Michigan now. Is she? Is she living in Michigan or Seattle?
My sister's Seattle.
Seattle. So she's not around the parents. She got married and has kids and everything?
Yeah. No, my parents live out there now that they're retired. So
in Seattle?
In the San Juan Islands.
Is that right?
Just north of Seattle.
They got tired of the cold?
Oh yeah. My stepfather never. He was from California. He grew up in Fresno, so he did
what
not
made him
like
go there?
the
What?
cold.
My goodness.
Yeah, he does not like it.
It didn't take that long.
He lived in Michigan for nearly 30 years.
30 years.
Going also GM.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah. So
that's interesting. So what got you back to Japan after that experience? What was the next time you came back?
So went back to school. I was a sophomore in Japan. So I was a junior, and yeah, I just had the itch to come back to Japan. I wanted to.
Did you go to college in this? You did go to college in the States?
Yeah, I went to Michigan State.
And studied what? What was your major?
I studied, Bachelor of Arts.
Okay.
Social science was the department. I had a dual major of economics and anthropology.
Okay.
And how I ended up in the career that I'm now.
Which is?
Just logistics and supply chain.
Okay, yeah. How'd you end up?
Just looking to come back to Japan, to work in Japan, and met a company through some people that I had met on the program originally going to Japan, who were asked if they wanted to join this Japanese logistics company. And I said, I'll do that. Don't know what logistics is, but I'll do it.
I'll do it if it gets me back to Japan.
Yeah.
Did you have any reason, did you have someone here in Japan that you wanted to come back to see?
I had met my ex-wife.
Okay.
Through one of my trips to Japan, and
as a student.
As a student,
right?
And we'd gotten married.
That was a good reason,
yeah.
Okay.
And I just decided let's move back to Japan. And Tokyo, I hadn't spent a lot of time here, but to me Tokyo was where everything was at. Right? It was not living in Shiga. It was not living in Nagoya or any place else. Japan is beautiful outside of Tokyo. But when it comes to business, for me, it was all about Tokyo. I think Osaka also has a similar vibe, but it's different.
It's not Tokyo.
It's not as international, is it?
I think the thing that makes Tokyo so unique are all the embassies are here.
Yeah.
And that brings everyone the way they really are in their country. They don't have to feel like they have to conform. But in Osaka, people start trying to become more Japanese, I think, for some reason. They start speaking Kansai, which you have to. But in Tokyo, you can stay. But
we were talking about this the other day. And Marie, my second wife, and I, before we moved to back to Japan, because she had studied here as well in the same program as me, a few years later.
She's from Michigan.
She's from Michigan.
Okay.
We grew up 20 miles apart.
Didn't know it.
Did not know each other.
Okay.
Our schools were so small, Class D. So she also graduated with a class of like 50 or 60 kids. Our sports teams played against each other because we were such small schools.
But your ages, are you different in age?
Just 2 years.
2 years.
So another unique thing that we just happened to find out about each other is she was born May 16th. My sister was born May 19th in the same hospital. And back then you spent probably 4 or 5 days at the hospital.
You mean the same? So they were there at the same time?
They were there at the same time. So I probably saw her in the cradle next to my sister in the hospital.
Isn't that interesting?
It's amazing.
It's like a movie for me. You know what I think, Scott? It's like when you see the movie when the person that they're going to marry, they just pass, they open the door, and they're just closing it just as they're coming in, or getting off the train, you're getting on. Yeah. It's that type of thing.
And we just happened, our lives sort of aligned at just the right time because her divorce was final, like the same month or the next month that my divorce was final. And her ex was half Korean, half American. And so her daughters are like a quarter Asian, and my kids are a quarter Japanese.
And people look at the two of you and say, "Nah, how'd that happen? That happened. We want to know how that happened." Yeah. I was trying to think. I figured you'd been married before because I said, this cannot be Maria's kids. Marie, right?
Yeah, Marie.
Marie's kids. But then a couple of them didn't look like they were related either.
Yeah.
Because one was hers and one was yours. Yeah. I'm thinking, anyway, I said, I'll find out.
Yeah.
Tell Marie that. I said, I'll find out. But I like talking to you two outside because I could feel the warmth and the acceptance that she just wants to know some people.
Yeah. And I told her, I said, Tokyo is unlike any other experience you've had in Japan. And Tokyo to me was, and I kept telling her, because she didn't know me before, and I'm working in the U.S., and I'm telling her, man, I said, my whole business network and my whole adult relationships that I'd known from the time I was in my mid-20s to I was, 45 was in Japan. So I've got these great people like, there's Lance, there's Dan, there's, Mike.
There's everybody, yeah.
And she's like, oh,
how do you develop that
one
again?
One of these days I got to come to Tokyo with you. And then I get this opportunity to move back. Mm-hmm. Not only my kids here, but my oldest son has 2 grandchildren, my grandchildren. So I've got 2 grandsons.
Okay.
And she's like, yeah,
so your grandpa,
we got to move to Tokyo for a few years. And so she's been great, just, becoming a grandma with me.
So, but you're working here and she isn't? Or she's working here?
She's looking for a job.
Okay.
She was a financial planner in the U.S. Before we left.
For whom? For individuals?
Edward Jones,
okay.
Large financial firm like Fidelity in the U.S.
Right.
And so she kind of closed her practice to come to Japan, and now she's looking for things to do. She's volunteering at Second Harvest. My old friend Charles McChilton.
Yeah, right. He's a good guy.
He's a great guy.
He is a good guy.
I just find it so unique being in Tokyo is we're all foreigners. Unless you're Japanese, you're not Japanese. And so if you're not Japanese, you're a foreigner. So whether you're French, whether you're Italian, whether you're American or Australian, British, whatever, we connect in that way very easily. You see a non-Japanese person on a train, you strike up a conversation. They don't care where you're from. You're a foreigner too.
You're a foreigner, bingo.
And
you have very similar reasons.
Yeah, and so what I've tried to do in my business is create a team of very international, diverse people, and I'm doing something I think is very unique here. Is I'm employing women who are extremely smart, smarter than me, and that's not that difficult, and men who maybe just out of college. From Italy, I got this new guy working for me. He's, he took the N1 exam, Japanese language exam, and he's like completely fluent. We're not being the typical Japanese company or the typical non-Japanese company in Japan.
What's the name of the company?
It's a company called DSV. DSV. It's a logistics company based in Denmark. We're now the third largest logistics company globally. We did a couple of acquisitions recently that help us grow to this size. But I worked in the past for a very large German-Swiss company.
Which one?
Kuehne+Nagel.
Kuehne+Nagel.
They're the world's largest logistics company now. DHL, Kuehne+Nagel, Schenker, DSV. We're all part of this global.
Right.
I mean, there's FedEx and UPS, as Americans know, but they're big, certainly. Right. But international logistics companies are really kind of dominated by the Europeans. They've done a really good job of just integrating with the local companies, the local population.
Throughout the world, yes.
Throughout the world.
Okay.
I've been in the industry for over 30 years. Got my start with a Japanese logistics company.
Which one?
Very small company called Fuji Logitech.
I remember Fuji Logitech.
Based in Shizuoka, part of the Suzio group originally, then spun off. And they got me my start in this industry. I was in sales, just making cold calls and meeting non-Japanese companies. So ran across opportunities with the Gap and Dell Computer and Land's End and these companies, and that kind of really established my career.
Because you were able to use the abundance of items they'd bring to you that you'd have to do logistics for.
Right, those companies hadn't really operated in Japan, and back in the early 90s is when they started coming to Japan, bringing back the license, taking back the license for the Japanese trading companies and setting up their own shops.
Right, from Denso.
So they,
Denso Dairy had everything.
Nishoiwai and Sumisho, trading companies, and Coach and all these Louis Vuitton, all these brands now are just massive here, and they need logistics. Everybody needs logistics. Pretty much everything you consume,
anything,
clothing,
someone has to get it there somehow.
Televisions, So when I lived in the U.S. for the 10 years, I was approaching Japanese electronics companies, Sony's, Panasonic's, Toshiba's, Fujitsu's, and such. And then came back to Japan, and again, it's more of the European American companies that we work with locally here to help them understand the logistics market.
So, what's your position in this company now?
I'm managing director.
Managing director, which is that equal to the president?
President, yeah.
The president. You just say managing director. Why? To soften
That's what they call.
I have. But you have no one above you other than the parent company.
I've my boss sits in Hong Kong, and he's responsible for APAC. So he's got like 12 or 13 countries under him.
Right. Is he about your age, or is he a lot older?
He's a little bit younger than me, actually.
Is that right?
He's French.
That's what I think.
I worked for 2 French people.
And he speaks how many languages?
He probably speaks 3 or 4.
Chinese, French, English.
He speaks Chinese,
and German.
French, English. I don't think he speaks
German. Okay. All right.
But I think he probably speaks Cantonese and Mandarin.
Cantonese, okay.
Because
Mandarin,
he's been based in Hong Kong. I think his wife is Chinese.
Okay.
I only speak 2, but I'm not your typical American.
Right.
like you.
Right.
We most.
What's typical? How?
What they say is that you're bilingual. You speak 2 languages.
Oh,
trilingual.
You speak one language.
No, but Japanese.
But do you read and write?
You
see enough of it that you'll know some of the characters.
I can read pretty much anything I see on the subways, train stations.
Okay.
I tell you, Google Translate is something we never had when we were growing up, or when we were starting our careers.
Of course.
And now it's like copy paste.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, right.
One of the guys that I went to Japan with on that original program through Michigan, through down in Shiga, the Michigan boat. He ended up becoming, and he still is, probably the top technical translator in the world from Japanese to English.
Wow.
He works for Toyota.
How long has he been here? He came at the same time?
He lives in Michigan. He studied Japanese, majored at Michigan, University of Michigan, and lived in Japan for a few years, working for a Japanese company, and then went back to the States and basically built his practice. And his main contract is with Toyota. But yeah, he's an amazing guy.
That's interesting.
But you gotta have the patience to study and.
You have to have a reason too.
Yeah.
You gotta have it. You have to be able to monetize that somehow.
Oh yeah.
Because if you don't, you just become a curiosity for the Japanese.
Yeah.
That's great. So and you don't even have an accent. Wow, that's good.
You
make any money. That's nice. And then you go to your little local Joe, and you get your instant ramen for the night. And you say, I really impressed them today, didn't I?
Yeah.
No, I didn't want to go that route.
Me neither.
I said no. I could see that coming real quick too.
Yeah. I was an independent businessman from 1999 to 2003 almost. And when you ran for president, I voted for you because I saw a successful American who'd started his own business, who was not part of that corporate elite. And I remember shaking your hand, saying, "Congratulations, Lance! You're an inspiration to us independent business."
You know who called me right after that? Who called me and said, "Let's come have lunch?" Skip Orr.
Oh, really?
Boeing.
Yeah.
And he said, "Lance, would you like to have lunch with me?" And I said, "Anyway, what do you plan for the future, or what would you like to end with?"
How would I like?
What are your plans? Yeah. What are your plans for the future?
That's the $1 million question.
Well, you gotta have something.
Marie and I are going to be here for at least the next 5 years.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I don't want to work forever, so hopefully be able to retire sometime in my early 60s. Until her daughters start having children in the U.S. We've got grandkids here, and then we'll have to figure out living between the States and Japan, and maybe Hawaii is a good central location for people to come visit Grandma and Grandpa. It's like, Japan will always be home, the U.S. will always be home, Michigan there will always be family, so we'll spend our time between those 3 places most likely. Yeah.
Scott, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
Fantastic. That was a wonderful podcast. I enjoyed it. I want to thank all of you for watching. Make sure you click like and subscribe. And never forget, it's all alone. Continue to reach for the stars, and you're too blessed to be stressed.